Jimmy D and the Wolf podcast.
Yes, sir.
Coming to you from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and Madison, Indiana.
Against all odds today.
Yeah, I mean, the power is out in my home community in Nashville, and so I got a hotel room primarily, so that I can get on. I mean, I can't go without getting on social media and checking all my feeds. But number one was to get this podcast done. It was supposed to already be done. Monday morning is when we normally post them, and
we've been trying for about 36 hours to get to it, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we were going to try Sunday night, and the power was gone. And usually when the power goes out, you think it's going to be an hour or two, or maybe you go to bed and it's certainly going to be on in the morning when you get up, and then you wake up and no, there's no power. So you get on. I had some charged up. This guy here, this is like 10 charges on this thing. That's a monster. And it was fully charged, and I use that to charge my phone. And I was checking local websites, and the Nashville NES, Nashville Electric Service, I guess, they said on Twitter, it could be for parts of Nashville a week to 2 weeks. I'm like, what?
Just to get to it. Right.
Week to 2 weeks. I was expecting any hour is going to click on.
Yeah. Right.
So everything in my freezer and my fridge is going to be spoiled. I mean, if not already. I mean, I don't know how long. I mean, maybe it's still at the edge now if it came back on. But, we take it for granted. I mean, modern life,
We take so many things for granted, and in our society, and we're not quite the homesteaders we used to be.
Yeah, yeah. I can't help but think about the song Wichita Lineman.
Right. Yeah. Well, man, you and I were talking earlier, and I had this thought when you first started saying that, is we were talking earlier about some of these songwriter excursions that they do on the buses, and a certain sense of creative minds intentionally making themselves uncomfortable.
Yeah, you were talking about Jack White.
Yeah.
He's a weird duck anyway, based on what I can see.
They say that he will intentionally put things in hard to reach places.
So, give me an example. What do you mean? Like put his guitar in another room? What do you mean? How far away?
Yeah, I think if it's something that you use every day, it's like the equivalent of putting your toothbrush on the top shelf, or putting shampoo on the top shelf, or something of that extent, to where you're going to have to reach to get it, just to make things hard on purpose. And he's a very eccentric cat, and I've read that he does that on a regular basis to keep himself from getting comfortable.
Well, you were telling me a story of a friend of yours who was working in his home, and sure. I don't know how much of that you can share of all of the story, but there's enough to. You said the guy kept getting.
I could share quite a bit as long as I don't say his name.
Well, let's hear it.
I don't want to burn any bridges. But I have a friend that I've played with on and off, and he's done a fair amount of painting in Jack White's residence in Nashville. And so that he's a very eccentric cat, that he would change the modality of what he wanted in the house. He was painting murals in there. And my favorite story was that he said he was painting vintage bicycles in a particular room in Jack's house. And Jack just rolls in one day after he had been working on it for months on end. And he rolled in one day and he says, he said, I think this would be better if we did a safari setting instead of these vintage bicycles. I'm just but that's why he's brilliant, in his own way. That's probably the very thing that makes him as productive as he is. So he does lots of production and stuff. It's not just the White Stripes. I mean, he's written lots of songs.
Yeah, how many side bands has he got? I mean, Rockin' Tears, and I think there's another side. Well, I mean, the White Stripes are dead now. I mean, and supposedly, I mean, what is his wife / girlfriend or sister? I even saw a clip. I mean, I thought it was fake news that he literally said that, but there was a clip of him playing and introduced her as his sister when she's actually his wife. That is weird. That's weird. That right there is weird. Anyway, you told me something else about that story. Why he thought he kept him around?
Right, to be a buddy.
Because he was lonely.
Right, exactly. And I think so many creatives are that way, man. You know,
well,
when you're eccentric.
Yeah, I heard Johnny Depp Johnny Depp's gone through some tough times. I guess now he's a little more. There was an article, I think, in the Rolling Stone or one of those magazines that portrayed him in a really bad light. And they went and interviewed him, and they said the only people around him were people that he was paying. He had no actual friends. So, I think that happens to a lot of creatives. I mean, did Michael Jackson?
Hang out with Johnny Depp.
What's that? Yeah, I think he'd be a fun hang. You think it'd be a fun hang.
So it would be.
Anyway, Jack White, he was at Bridgestone Arena, and I bought tickets. I'd never seen him live, and my buddy who I was going to concerts with at the time, I said, "Hey, you want to go see Jack White?" And he said, "I've seen him once, and I don't care to see him again." I mean, and I was like, "Why?" And I know there's Jack White, very passionate fans out there, but I probably wouldn't be excited to see him again. I mean, it's a lot of the noise level is high. I mean, not the volume; it's just noise. It's just not discernible notes, just amorphous noise coming out of the speakers. I mean, sometimes he just lays his guitar on the stage and at full volume and walk off. I mean, and he would go up, and he had a female drummer, a really good drummer, but he would go up repetitively on her platform, on her drum throne, riser about 3 feet off, and he would get up there and he would knock all of her gear off the riser, the cymbals, the toms. They weren't connected to the kick, and all she'd have left would be the kick and the snare. And then as soon as he would leave the riser, the drum tech or whomever would come out and set everything back. Now they're, still playing, everything's still going, and he did that like half a dozen times. I'm like, maybe I'm old and jaded. What's the point of that?
That's interesting.
He did it multiple times. Maybe it wasn't 6 times, but he did it at least 3 times where he knocked her cymbal stands. And that's he just sent them flying, like 10 feet across the stage. And she's still playing, with whatever she's got left up there to play. She's still playing.
You knew which drums she needed, right? You never knocked over the snare, huh?
I guess not. And the kick. Well, he didn't move the kick. I noticed he's got 12, I think it's 12 Grammys. And his music doesn't strike me as music that is so unique that there's a piece of lint that was hanging off this high-class hotel here. Anyway,
it is a Ramada.
Yeah, I know other artists that I respect a lot and love and think their songwriting is deep and amazing, and that don't have anywhere near 12 Grammys.
Yeah, I think sometimes, man, somebody slips through the cracks that has tapped into the blues. Because the blues, it's always there, it's always prevalent. It's something that we forget about, but it's super powerful. It's kind of embedded in our brains or souls or whatever. And I think every so often an artist slips through the cracks that has sort of their take on the blues, and it really hits home with a lot of people. And I think for whatever reason, he did that. He struck a chord with young people that really resonated, And a lot of young people, to me, the coolest thing about him, man, is I know a lot of young people, some of my younger students, that got into the blues because of it. That, you know, like Ball and a Biscuit and that kind of stuff, that all of a sudden they were finding Sun House and Muddy Waters. And, you know, he was the blues to a certain era of people, you know, a certain generation of people. And that doesn't happen near frequently enough, but it certainly happens ever so often. Just like John Mayer is the blues to a certain, you know, there's a certain age of people that if you ask them, you know, who's your favorite blues artist, there are a certain age of people that would say John Mayer because they heard the Tri album. There's a certain age of people that would say Jack White. You know, that's what the blues is to me. Like, to me, when I was a kid, it was Led Zeppelin. I remember hearing those Zeppelin albums and thinking, how did they come up with all this stuff? This is incredible. How did they invent this sound? And it was many years later, it's like, oh, they were playing the blues. This is cool. But I thought Led Zeppelin invented the blues when I was 12 years old.
Sure.
It's like, these British guys are amazing. They've got long hair, and the dude plays the guitar with a fiddle bow, and they invented this style of music, and it's the best music I've ever heard. And I think that's the thing, you know, with what Jack White's done and so many artists. Not near enough. It needs to happen more frequently than it does, you know, because that's a way of introducing younger people to the blues. It has to change. And you and I have talked about this to great length, man, that the opposite side of that spectrum is there's so many of the purists that as soon as somebody does something new with the blues or with jazz or with anything, really, they're the first ones that stand up and say, hey, that's not the blues, or hey, that's not jazz. And it happens in every genre.
Yeah.
That's not the blues. Well, why isn't it the blues? Because it's you know, Muddy Waters caught a lot of flack for some of his most innovative albums that the purists were saying that's not the blues.
Sure.
But now it's the funny thing is now that the purists are, you know, mostly guys that don't play. It's mostly older white dudes that don't even play.
Yeah. And the same. I would say it's the same thing with jazz. I mean, most people want jazz to stay in its heyday of the 50s and the 60s. You know,
exactly.
Miles Davis and Coltrane,
Thelonious Monk, and you know, Cole Porter wrote all the songs. Yeah. Nobody's allowed to write any more songs.
Yeah.
Just like in the blues, man, Willie Dixon wrote all the songs. Nobody's allowed to write anymore. But you got to do something brand new. It's just got to sound exactly like that.
There's some amazing jazz artists today.
Well, I think it's across the board, man. I think it's better now than it's ever been in every genre. I think there's more great music now.
And the genres have the limits have been dropped. Anyway, back to Jack White. Before we leave that, I have to give him credit for when you write an anthem that is as well known and is played by high school orchestras, Seven Nation Army, marching bands play that.
Yeah.
Using all their horns. I mean, you know, a completely different genre. Their Seven Nation Army is an amazing song that just pretty much, you start playing that riff, everybody knows that song.
Everyone on the planet knows that song.
And when you write a modern day anthem like that, props to you.
Right. You know, I mean, because there aren't many.
No, there aren't many. There aren't many. So give him props for that. Maybe that's worth about 10 Grammys right there.
Well, you know, he's done his own thing, man. In a sea of lookalikes, Jack White has definitely retained his his own identity. So he deserves kudos.
Some of the stuff I absolutely adore, but it was just in that concert there was a lot of just noise. It was like it wasn't even musical.
Yeah.
I mean, there's such a thing as musique concrète, I guess, which is, a technique using the French word, musique concrète. And it's just kind of noise. I guess that's a thing. I could never listen to it. But
I think it's hard for some of those guys to refine the show, man. When they're on that, like uber level of creation. It's hard for him to refine the set. I saw Soundgarden one time like that, and I'd seen Soundgarden many times, but I saw them one time in Indianapolis outdoors where they're in the middle of some creative explosion, and it was just like what you're talking about. It's just like weirdness, of like leaning guitars against amps, and they're in the middle of a songwriting explosion, but the show was kind of like, what's happening here? So I think that the reason why I bring it up is the question that I have is, if you're in the middle of a creative explosion like that, does it make for good live shows? Because I don't think it does. Looking back at the Hendrix stuff, the biggest lull in the live Hendrix shows was when he was writing some of his best music but wasn't playing it yet. Assuming, I don't know, but I assume it's because he wanted to play the new stuff, but it wasn't ready.
I got you.
He's mad at what he was having to play, When Hendrix was writing the Cry of Love album and still having to play Purple Haze, I don't think he was happy with the live set.
Well, anyway, so Jack White, a lot of pros. Some of his stuff I really love. I just was surprised at some of the randomness. And then he's got a record company, Third Man Records, and he discovers people that nobody else will sign and nurtures their career. Props for that. I give him. I've been to them. They have a store there. It's in I think what'll be East Nashville, it's kind of southeast Nashville. I've been there. Still don't know my names of where all the different communities end up, but it's a certain kind of industrial area, and that's where his place is. And he's got a little shop there you can go in and buy merch and stuff, and that's where the recording studios are. But can't get into that just by walking in. But it was interesting. He's doing good work. He's doing the Lord's work there. Anytime you're supporting young artists or aspiring artists. So props to Jack White for that.
And I think he's probably looking for some of the blues-based artists too, It seems like he's sort of stuck to his guns on that.
Or, not blues or Americana. If you define, to me, and it's probably not a right definition, but Americana includes blues influenced stuff to me, and I don't think that's accurate by what others would say. But Americana would, it would be, and jazz influence could be part of Americana. If it's not pure jazz and pure blues, because what is Americana? To me, it means American music, and you put in some bluegrass. All of the music that is American should be put in a pot and jumbled together and called Americana, when that would include blues and jazz and bluegrass to me.
Yeah. That was my thing, man. When I first started hearing the term Americana, I didn't know what it meant. And I was like, well, what is it? And everybody had a different answer.
Yeah, it's kind of a catch-all. I guess it's kind of a catch-all. I've been using a catchphrase, Americana alternative, to describe my music. So kind of a foot in both camps, alternative rock and Americana. A little more, aggressive. Or I did call it Americana smooth, but everybody thought it was jazz. So smooth jazz. So I was advised to stop using that one. Anyway, you mentioned John Mayer earlier. And he has a show. I think he's an eccentric cat too. He has a Sunday night show, a live IGTV, a live stream on Instagram, and his humor. He loves stand-up comedy, and he has I've heard that he wants to be a stand-up. One of his side gigs, he'd love to be a stand-up comic. And he does some really exotic, or not off the wall stuff on that show. Have you seen it? Have you seen any of his stuff?
But I love Mayer, man. I love everything about it.
And he's got a few people in the
variety.
room. He's got a few people in the room when he does it. You can hear him laugh in the background. I mean, I don't think they're an audience. They're people who probably on his staff. And he's goofing. And he did this mannequin, and the mannequin had the face mask on, and he had a name for it, and he had it on his lap, and then he played Waiting for the World to Change while Clifford, or whatever the name of the mannequin was. And then he does a ventriloquist act where he has the mannequin talk, and before he does the ventriloquist act, he puts his own face mask on. So he has no ventriloquist technique other than because his mouth is covered and he's doing it. And then while he was doing it, when he first started, he forgot to put the mask up when he's doing the mannequin voice. And then he puts the mask up and he's talking. And then he's doing the two voices, and he literally forgot he was supposed to be talking in his own voice, and he answered in the mannequin voice, and he started laughing so hard, and that's when they cut the clip.
Oh, great.
I mean, just being a complete goof, and it was funny. It was good. Some of it. And he will write songs that are, scaldingly satirical. And he wrote a song. Remember, after who was it? Geffen posted a picture of his 170-foot yacht. Remember David Geffen, president of, I don't know which record company he's president of. And when we first started doing the quarantine in place, he posted a shot of his yacht from the drone, a drone flying over, showing a shot of his 170-foot yacht, or whatever it was, a huge, multi-million-dollar. And that was a little bit insensitive, people thought, that he needed to show off that, hey, I'm quarantining a place in this $250 million or whatever it is thing. And John Mayer wrote a satirical song. I can't remember what, but it was hilarious. It was on another song, maybe one of his own, but he changed the lyrics. And it's good stuff. Good stuff. He's a hilarious guy.
Mayer's brilliant.
He is brilliant. He is brilliant.
That Try album, man, that's one of the best heavy blues albums that have been recorded since the likes of Stevie Ray and Hendrix. Yes. Man, that album is a mighty, mighty album.
Yes. And he just, okay, I did this, now I'm back to whatever. Then he moved to Montana, and he kind of got into more folky, alt folk or Americana roots. A couple albums there were like, is this Mayer? And his last album that I'm aware of, unless he came out with one since, was, can't remember what the name of it, but he had on there, It's in the Blood, and it had I Still Feel Like Your Man, which was supposedly about Katy Perry, because he used to date Katy Perry, but apparently he said the whole album's basically about her. He still has a thing for her. They hadn't dated in 5 years. So, you want to talk about somebody who'd be fun to hang out with? John Mayer.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd pay money to hang out with him for a weekend.
Me too, man, to jam with him.
Yeah.
Share licks with Mayer.
Yeah. And now he's playing with the Grateful Dead. That's interesting.
And he kills that gig, too, man. He's great at it. Is
he? I haven't seen any clips, or you've seen clips?
He's great at it. He still plays like himself, but it fits somehow. He can get just outside of the blues enough to. I don't want to say anybody could ever really fill Jerry's shoes, but man, Mayer does it as well as anybody can do it because he's got a big vocabulary. I mean, he usually plays inside with most of his original stuff, but he can get out there. So
you've seen videos, or you've seen him live?
Oh yeah, both, like live and the videos. I used to go see the Dead all the time, man.
You saw John Mayer with the Dead?
Yes.
Really? How long ago was that?
I want to say a couple of years, man. Maybe 2 years, maybe 3. I've seen Mayer 5 or 6 times. And the first time I saw him was the time that got me hooked on him because I didn't want to go see him. The girl that I was dating at the time, she wanted to go see him for her birthday. I got tickets to see him, and the only song I had ever heard my whole life from John Mayer was Your Body is Wonderland. I was dreading going to see him. And it was the Try tour.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, dude, he killed it. It was. I showed up thinking it was Body's Wonderland and bubblegum all night long, and it was Mayer and Steve Jordan and Palladino.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! She was probably disappointed.
Exactly right. I loved it. She was like, "That wasn't what I expected." Me either. Yeah, that's not what I expected.
Oh my word!
Yeah, it was killing. They did Axis. Wait until.
Oh, I know. I wore that CD out when it came out.
It was kill. Yeah.
I was first introduced to John Mayer in 2001, 2002, roughly 2003, in that range. I went to a Christian musician summit in Washington, state of Washington, and he wasn't there, but Phil Keaggy was there. Phil Keaggy did the keynote concert, I guess you'd say, the Saturday night, the final concert. Lincoln Brewster was there, put on a clinic, Anyway, in one of the songwriting, because I was just interested in getting songwriting. I'd written some songs, but I never studied songwriting. I was interested in songwriting. And I remember the one guy was lecturing, and I don't remember his credentials, but there was one guy who had written a hymn that was in all the hymnals, and that's his big claim to fame. He was written in the 80s or whatever. I'll probably find all my notes from that. It'd be interesting to go back. And the one guy said that he named some contemporary songwriters that were good writers, and he mentioned John Mayer. And when the break happened, I went out to the record store and bought the latest CD, which was Room for Squares. I think it probably had only been out. I mean, when did that come out? I mean, it probably came out. It was still pretty fresh. Still pretty fresh, I think. And I listened to that, and I was like, man, this is amazing. Because I wasn't listening to radio then. I was really into the blues. And I remember like running through the halls of my high school. And because the guy said, this guy's a good songwriter. And so I started researching him a bit. And I'm like, this kid's only like 20 years old at the time. And I've been a fan ever since, really.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
And then when he did the Try thing, I always knew that he could, because he started out being a Stevie Ray Vaughan, just passionate about Stevie Ray Vaughan. So how do you go from sitting in your bedroom from 13 to as a teenager, studying all the Stevie Ray Vaughan licks, and then writing Your Body's a Wonderland? That doesn't match.
He just found his own voice, man.
He did. He now that guy is at a whole nother level because he's got so many. You want to talk about a spider diagram for that guy? He can write the sensitive, like Your Body's a Wonderland, and Daughters. I love Daughters. Be kind to your daughters because they'll become women. Is that the name of the song? Yeah, that won Grammy Best Song of the Year, Daughters. And then he can just wail on guitar in bluesy style, wail with love. He can play with the Grateful Dead. He's got a phenomenal watch collection, I've heard. Comedian. Yeah, I think he wants to be a late night show. Would you imagine having Late Night with John Mayer? And he's jamming with the band. And he's up there doing comedy, and he's something else.
I would watch it.
Oh,
we got to make a pact to go see him together when he comes back around again.
Absolutely. I saw him at Bridgestone Arena last time around. Yeah, I had pretty good seats. He did not disappoint. think I recorded the whole thing. I always record the concerts I go to. Except the Jack White one. Jack White made you put your phone in a case so you couldn't do any recording.
Really?
Yeah. Everybody's supposed to put their phone in a case. That was an interesting story. Definitely a miracle from God. This big case that locks, and then you can only unlock it back where you go through the ticket area. So you can keep your phone. You don't store it somewhere, but it's locked up, and they watch you as you lock it up. So I put it in my leather jacket. I took my jacket off, and somehow apparently it fell out of my pocket. I'm looking for it. I can't find it. I go back and I look. I go to the security guard area. Will anybody turn it in? And there's some people turning in phones, or like 5 of us had missing our phones. I was about ready to leave and go home. You know, it was a new iPhone. It was an iPhone 10. I just got a $1,000 phone. And lo and behold, how it got found, girl got drunk. Her friend was looking for her phone in that area, and they found my phone instead. And if that girl had gotten drunk and she's still there and her friend's trying to help her find her phone, and I had looked after the lights came on, went back, and I looked behind. I thought there's no way my phone is anywhere around my area, but it was. Anyway, thank God that girl got drunk and somebody stuck around and helped her find her phone and found mine instead. I don't even know if she ever found hers.
Losing a phone nowadays can really mess you up.
Well, did I tell you about the other time? I hope it's interesting. I was at a church service. This is a God thing. I believe that God ordains our steps. And a friend of mine who plays in their worship band, who also plays at my church, Blaine, he said, come. And I came there. The beginning was a Friday night. And I'm like, I don't want to sit around on a Friday night. So I left to go home, and I lost my phone. Couldn't find it. The guy there said, well, you can ask the sound guys when the service is over. I sat through his whole sermon, and he gave a specific message that really spoke to me at the end. And then I went and asked the guys behind the desk. They said nobody turned it in. So I go home and turn on my phone finder, and there it is right in front of the church, because it was still on, and I drove all the way back to Franklin. It's about a 20-minute ride one way. And there it is laying in the grass right in front of the church. So my conclusion is God wanted me to hear that message. So he made, I'm just imagining the orders in heaven, maybe a beginner, private level angel is given the job. Now you got to make sure that he loses his phone, so he has to stay there. Make sure it falls in the grass so it doesn't get damaged. Don't have it fall on the street where somebody will drive over, because I was across the street is where my car was. Make sure it falls in the grass where it won't get damaged and nobody's going to find it.
Can't go on the concrete.
Can't go on the concrete. Can't go on the road. So you got to do that. And then the angel says, yeah, I reached in his pocket. I made sure it fell out in the grass. I did as you ordered me. And the supervising angel goes, good job. Good job.
Right.
Sometimes I feel like I keep those angels kind of busy. Have you ever felt that way? All right. Well, what else you got to talk about, buddy? Do you have any other words of wisdom for our viewers? Internet connection is unstable. I think we need to close it up.
Jimmy D and the Wolf.
Jimmy D and the Wolf. We'll see you next time.
See you next time. Peace.